Well, hello, and welcome back. I'm AJ O'Neill. This is Beyond Code, and tonight we're going to talk about the mod operator again. I'm going to be a little bit more step by step about it than kind of last time we talked about integer division and mod and how those work together. But I just want to talk about what mod can do for you in another day-to-day situation. I think maybe parsing times is super common, and doing the types of things like dealing change, those are super common, but that's what we discussed in the previous video. But another thing that's perhaps even more common that you're going to want to do with mod is basically a circular array. Or when you get to the end of an array, you want to start back at the beginning. So think of this like a carousel. You've seen this on websites all the time. There's a bunch of images, and then as the images go through, one fades out, the next fades in, so on and so forth, and it goes back to the beginning. So this sort of loop logic is where we would want to use mod, and I'm going to show you that in just a second. So first of all, let's review. Mod means remainder. So if I take 0 mod anything, I'm always going to get back 0 because there is nothing. There is no remainder. If I am dividing 0 by 7, I'm always going to get 0. If I am dividing 1 by 7, I'm going to get 0 if I'm doing integer division, but I'm going to have a remainder of 1. So if I were to, no, I won't go to that. Same thing. So all the way up, 2, 3, 4, the remainder is always that number, all the way until I get up to 6 mod 7, meaning what is the remainder of 6 divided by 7? It is 6. But once we get to 7, well, 7 goes into 7 exactly one time. There is no remainder. And then we start the cycle back over. So 8 divided by 7 yields a remainder of 1. 9 divided by 7 yields a remainder of 2. So on and so forth. So when we get to 14, we're also going to have the remainder is 0. When we get to 21, the remainder is 0. So on and so forth. So with that out of the way, and I guess I kind of already explained that here, let's just take a quick look at, let's pretend that these are, image URLs, and we're going to show a picture of apples, we're going to show a picture of oranges, we're going to show a picture of bananas. So here's an array, and we just have in here the words, but let's pretend that it's something a little more meaningful than that. So I'm just calling, instead of calling this array, let's call it fruits. It's always kind of silly to call an array unless it's very generic. And then the maximum number that we can count to, if we say, well, what's the 0th element of this array? It's apples. I hesitate to say first, so I say 1th. What's the 1th element of this array? Because technically the 0th element is the first element, which, that's kind of confusing. So what's the 1th element? What's the 2nd element, right? So we can index 0 is apples, 1 is oranges, 2 is bananas. So if we try to index 3, so if we did fruits, that's apples. Oops, let's say fruit here. Let me come down here. So let me get it to not complain at me. So we could do 0, that's apples. We could do 1, that's oranges. We could do 2, that's bananas. That's what we'd get if we log that out, print that out to the screen. You're with me, I hope. Now, of course, if we do 3, then we're going to get null or an exception or something like that. I happen to be doing this, prototyping this out in JavaScript, but whatever language you're using, you're going to get either null or undefined or the empty string value, or you're not going to get something, okay? But if we were to do this, if we were to do max 3 mod max, we'd say, okay, we're going to take 3 and then we're going to divide it by max, which in this case is 3, and we're going to say, what is the remainder? Well, the remainder is 0. So that becomes 0. So effectively, we could index into 3, but we're going to get 0. And likewise, we could go 4. We're going to get 1. We could do 5. We're going to get 2. So if we had a loop, let's say, I'm just going to do this JavaScript style. So let's say we had a set timeout. and we're going to say that we're giving it a function. Let me actually do this a different way. Let's say advance carousel. Okay, so we're going to create a function called advance carousel. And then I'm going to say every second we want to advance the carousel. And so here, let's say there's, to do some code to show the carousel, right? That's going to go down there. Whoops. But up top here, what we're going to do, what we want to do, let me comment this out. This is kind of the solution. What we want to do is count plus equals 1. And then we want to essentially return fruits count, but we can't do that. But like we said, we can do max like that, and that would work. So great. We're doing well. But the thing is, this number is going to count up. So it's going to go up to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, so on and so forth. There's only 3 there. We don't need to go that high. Oh, excuse me. We don't ever actually need to store the number that high. And this doesn't matter so much in a language like JavaScript, because if you let the page run for 7 billion years, you're never going to max out your number of integers. Well, maybe if it was 7 billion years you would. But you're never going to max out your number of integers. In languages like C, where you're dealing with potentially integers that only go up to 256 and things like that, you want to be more careful about that. Anyway, the shortcut solution to this problem is just do count equals count plus 1, take that whole thing and do mod max. And then we don't have to do the mod here. And then if we were to inspect count, so now I've just recreated that, as you can see, so I'll get rid of it. If we were to inspect count, count will just continue to loop. 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2. If it were possible for the, say there's somewhere else in the code the carousel is being added to, removed from, or something like that, we could, of course, do fruits.length like this and just recalculate it every single time. So there we are. This is a super common use case. This is something that I advise you to look for. Oh, and there was actually one other thing that I was going to cover in this. I was going to talk about groups as well. So imagine that you have a bunch of people. Let me just open up another file here real quick. This is the last thing we're going to do. Imagine that you have a group of people. Imagine a real world scenario. You've got, say, 50 people, and you want to sort them into groups. You're going to have 4 teams, right? And that won't go in evenly, but that's okay. In the real world, often what we do is we do a count off. We say, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth, and say, oh, okay, all the 1s go over to the east wall. All the 2s go over to the west wall. All the 3s go to the north wall. All the 4s go to the south wall, right? We have some sort of way of dividing this up. Similar thing, if you wanted, you occasionally, this is not as common as the other scenario, but you occasionally come into situations in programming where you want to count off by a bucket. In fact, this is what a hash map is. If you ever hear the term hash map, a hash map is basically based on mod, using prime numbers and really large prime numbers. And yeah, it sorts things into groups. So what you could do is you could say, let's say we got a bunch. Let's see, let's say we've got some batches. So I'm going to, each batch is an array. And then we've got a bunch. So say we've got a bunch of people. So we're going to define bunch is equal to, and then there's just, 50 different people objects are in here. Maybe we retrieve the bunch from the database. There's a bunch of people. So we could go through the bunch and we could say for each, P for person in the bunch and I for index, batches, I mod, and then this would be batches.length. equals, or dot push, sorry, dot push P. So what we have here is, I should probably break this down a little bit more. Let's do this. Var batch equals, yeah, let's do it like this, just to make it a little easier to read. I'm all about making code easier to read. So we get this bunch of people. We're going to call it P for person, I for the index. And so the very first one in this loop is going to be 0, and then 1, 2, 3, all the way to 50, right? So as this increases, batches, I mod batches.length. Batches.length is batches.length is going to be 4. So we're going to take that person, and you're just counting off. This is what you're doing. You're counting off. The first one is 1, 2, 3. And then when you get to 4, or 0, 0, 1, 2, 3. And when you get to 4, because it's being modded by batches.length, it goes back to 0. 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, so on and so forth. So you could split bunches up into batches this way, and I've used this from time to time. It's not super common. The other one I think is really, really common, especially in front-end applications. You see that sort of thing all the time, but worth knowing. Anyway, I hope that this was helpful for you. If you have any questions, if you'd like anything clarified, please let me know. If you've got a, of a better way to explain this, or a great blog article, or a great example, also please put it down in the comments below. And with that, if you liked it, give it a like. If you want to see more like this, check down in the doobly-doo. And there's a couple of different channels. You can subscribe to this one, which this is probably the live channel that you're watching this on. And with all of that said, I hope that you have the best night ever. Adios.